Hello everyone, Arman here with the first ever live stream. We're going to be talking about the 10 biggest misunderstandings about autism and Asperger's. And I apologize if I look away from the camera because my computer screen's over that away. So I have to sometimes look away to see what you guys are typing. So I'm going to talk about biggest misunderstandings, and if you guys have any questions as I'm talking or after I'm done with what I'm saying, feel free to ask questions throughout and I'll be happy to answer them. The biggest misunderstanding about autism is that a lot of people have this very singular focus about autism. Some people, they see autism as someone who is very impacted, someone who has an intellectual disability, or in some cases people see people on the spectrum as being very high functioning well in society. Sometimes the idea of a character from, say, The Big Bang Theory. And depending on who you work with, a lot of times people, like in the profession, in autism professions, they work with the more impacted community, or in some circumstances people might work with individuals who aren't as impacted. Parents in particular, they see their kids and then they find parents with similar kids, and that forms the perception. So a lot of people have this very narrow perception of autism. So autism is a wide spectrum. It is not an intellectual disability. It affects people to various degrees, but first and foremost, it affects someone socially. That's the most important takeaway. So moving on to the next point that I want to talk about. Another big misunderstanding is a lot of people think people on the autism spectrum are all the same. And well, that could be further from the truth. Everyone is very different. A lot of times people say, oh, well, people who have Asperger's or are higher functioning, they're all nerds, they're all geeks, they're all into superheroes, they're all into comic books, whatever. And well, that's not true. Or people see people that are very impacted by autism and they think that they're all into Thomas the Train or whatever. And that is simply, that is not true. Yes, a lot of people on the spectrum might gravitate towards certain things more than a lot of other people, but everyone on the spectrum, we all have different interests. And yeah, so anyway, a little sidetrack. So for those that are joining me or those that are watching this video in the future, my name is Arman and I am on the spectrum, and I also run a group for people with autism and Asperger syndrome, and I've been running that for 10 years, and I've worked with a lot of people on the spectrum, like well over 100, probably a couple hundred at least. So anyway, moving on to the next discussion point. Another very interesting misunderstanding is that people on the spectrum cannot lie. And that's not true. People that are autistic can lie, and it does happen. I mean, people lie, whether they're autistic or not. Everyone is capable of lying. So now, do people on the spectrum lie less than other people? I don't know. Someone should do a study about that. If a study hasn't been done, it's quite possible that people lie less, but I've seen a lot of videos and discussions about how they don't lie, and they think a lot of people on the spectrum don't lie, and there might be some level of truth to that, but a lot of people on the spectrum are capable of lying just like anyone else. So there's the perception that people on the spectrum are more honest, and I think that's generally very true. I think we are more honest, generally speaking, but there can be very dishonest people no matter who they are, whether they're neurotypical or autistic or what have you. Going on to the next misunderstanding, and this is a big one. Autistic people don't want friends. That is not true. A lot of people, actually I know a lot of autistic people do want friends. Having run a group for all these years, I know for a fact a lot of people on the autism spectrum are looking for friends. That is absolutely 100% true, and I don't know where this misunderstanding came from or where it started or why it started, but a lot of people on the autism spectrum do want friends and they're seeking friendships, but a lot of times social difficulties are holding that person back from making friends, just not understanding body language or knowing what's an appropriate thing to talk about, or sometimes talking about the same thing for too long. So for a lot of us on the spectrum, we don't understand social cues, body language, tone of voice, all those different things. That's hard for us to master. Now, is it possible for us to learn these skills over time and develop them? I think it is. If we apply ourselves and really try, will we get it to the point where, say, neurotypical person gets it? I don't know. I mean, if someone really wants it, I think that social skills can be developed even later on in life, whether you're a teenager or an adult. But anyway, I'm digressing here. So anyway, the point was that people on the spectrum don't want friends, and I'm saying that is not true. A lot of people do want friends. Moving on to my next point, that is that people on the autism spectrum don't feel emotions or can't express emotions. That is definitely not true. We, all of us, I'm pretty sure every single person on the spectrum experiences emotions. I think we express them sometimes differently than other people, but sometimes we express our emotions in the most cleanest, clearest way possible. You know, a lot of times I think people on the spectrum are very clear about the emotions that they're experiencing. Sometimes, you know, when someone on the spectrum has a giant outburst, they're saying, hey, I'm pissed off. Or when someone on the spectrum likes someone, they might be more clear-cut about liking someone. So I think a lot of times that a lot of the social games that people play and the way that people bury their emotions, I think that actually disappears, not disappears, but I think people on the spectrum are actually, if anything, more expressive of their emotions. Now maybe there isn't as dynamic of a range for some people on the spectrum. The emotions might be more clear-cut at times, I think. But we all understand emotions. We all experience emotions. Every person on the spectrum experiences emotions and goes through emotions. So that, I don't know where that came from, but I heard that growing up. My mom would tell me that, oh, you don't understand emotions and blah, blah, blah. And I'm pretty sure she read it in a book because at the time the internet wasn't a thing. And so books were saying, hey, you know, people on the autism spectrum don't express emotions the same way. They don't understand emotions. I have no idea who came up with that theory. It existed before the internet. It's kind of a stupid theory in my opinion. So, but for some reason that theory perpetuates to this day for some really weird, odd reason. I do not know why that is, but there you go. Anyway, for the next point, which kind of ties into the previous point, is that people on the spectrum are not empathetic. I believe absolutely that people on the spectrum can be empathetic. Now, sometimes we might not know how to show empathy, or we might not experience empathy in the same way as other people, but I absolutely believe that people on the spectrum have some level of empathy and that we are indeed empathetic. Moving on. This is a very odd thing I hear from people sometimes. I hear a lot of times that, not a lot of times, but some people have the theory that people on the spectrum we have alien DNA. I don't know about that. Now, I will say this. When I was a teenager, I felt very isolated. I felt very out of touch with everyone else, and I wanted to believe that I was an alien. I was like, maybe I am an alien. Maybe I'm from a different planet. And I think a lot of us on the spectrum can feel like we're from somewhere else, that we're not from Earth. But I think we all are human. Whether we want to believe that or admit that, we want to also at the same time believe that we are special, that we're more than human. I think a lot of people on the spectrum want that because feeling so isolated, having difficulties making friends, having challenges in school, just not fitting in general. But I'm sorry, I don't believe that we're aliens. Another theory that I hear tossed around is that we are the next evolution on the human chain. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, a lot of people on the spectrum are very impacted by autism. So I think this feeds into a lot of people's superiority complex. I think that people are different. Now, are we evolving? Is autism part of that evolution, or maybe Asperger Syndrome? I don't know. I mean, one thing is that generally speaking, people are becoming less social. So not having good social skills isn't as bad as it used to be because, well, everyone's on their phone these days. And like people are talking to each other while on their phones, and that seems to be the norm. So I don't know. Now, I think it's highly unlikely that people on the spectrum are, you know, the X-Men, that were the next step. I definitely have read it, heard it. A lot of people, not a lot, but I know some people on the spectrum want to believe that, you know, that they're the next evolutionary step. I think it's just, again, a superiority complex. Sorry, guys. I mean, maybe, I'm not going to 100% disqualify it, but I think that there would have to be a lot of compelling evidence to prove that. I mean, yes, on the spectrum have savant talents and skills, and we have these super crazy memories, and we have the ability to do a lot of crazy things with our mind. And a lot of people on the spectrum are engineers, or they work in NASA. And so maybe in some ways it is an evolution of the brain. Maybe. I guess only time will tell. I mean, yeah, like I said, I guess maybe time will tell. Maybe this is humanity evolving, but it's a theory I've heard, and I'm not sure what to make of it. Anyway, moving on to the next misunderstanding. There's a belief that people on the autism spectrum cannot improve their social skills. And that is simply not true at all. We are 100% capable of improving my social skills. I've improved my social skills over the years. I still improve my social skills. As a matter of fact, making YouTube videos has actually helped me improve my social skills, because I can go back and see ways that I can improve myself, and I can actually apply this in real life. But I've seen people in real life where their social skills have gotten better. So there is no truth to that. We are not capable of improving our social skills, whether you have a child on the spectrum or you're an adult on the spectrum. You are 100% capable of improving your social skills. Now, it can be challenging. One way to really work on improving your skills is by recording yourself. Look and see how you come across. You don't have to share the recordings with anyone, but by recording yourself, you can get a sense of how you come across in person, and you can work on improving yourself. Or if you have a good friend, someone that you trust, you can get feedback from them, and that person can help you improve your social skills. So anyway, there's no truth to that where we cannot improve our social skills. That is not true. So for the next point, there's a theory that all autistic people are geniuses. That is not true. The people on the spectrum, we're all different. There are some people who are very impacted by autism and can do amazing artwork, or they have this incredible memory capabilities. And there are some people who, like I said, some people on the spectrum work in NASA. They become engineers. They're great composers. Some of us have savant talents and skills, and I don't know the exact percentage. I looked up the statistic a while ago. It's definitely more than the normal population, but no, not everyone. It's nowhere close. A lot of people on the spectrum are not geniuses. Only a very small percentage of individuals on the spectrum have savant skills and talents. And so just because someone is autistic doesn't mean that they have some genius skill. So, I mean, some of us do have these incredible, amazing talents, and that's great. But the truth of the matter is that, like I said, autism is a wide spectrum, and first and foremost, it's a social disability. It's not like, oh, it's a social disability and you get a special talent along with that. Some cases that's true, but it's not always, a lot of times that's not the case. Anyway, so Spider, all right, so he's saying that growing up with autism, he has worked on developing his social skills over the years. So thank you for chiming in. Good to see other people talking on the chat. Anyway, so here's my last point. So a lot of people on the spectrum have sensory needs, or very sensory in nature. And by sensory, I mean like some people on the spectrum, there's this enhanced hearing, or sounds hurt us more in some ways. Like certain sounds can just be very irritating. For me, as a kid, that was the sound of markers. I absolutely hated the sound of markers. Some people being in a crowded place like a mall, so all those people talking, like some people hear every single voice and it's just too much. For a lot of people, they can just tune out all the noises. Other sensory things can be touch related. So the need for, some people on the spectrum really need, they really like getting squeezed, getting hugs, or some people really like touching certain things, like the touch of paper can feel really good to someone. So actually, for me, I actually really do like the feeling of paper, like doing this, which is kind of like a form of stimming. This for me is a sensory sort of thing. So for me, I'm actually a very touchy person. Like certain things feel really good to me. But there's this misunderstanding that that everyone on the spectrum has these sensory needs. Now, some people on the spectrum do have sensory needs, but a lot of people don't have these sensory needs, or they're not the same sensory needs. Now, on the plus side, awareness of sensory needs has grown so that, for instance, AMC theaters, they have the lights dimmed and the sound not as loud for the, I think once a month. So there's a sensory needs day for AMC theaters and other, so there's that awareness about that. But a lot of people on the spectrum don't have the same sensory needs. Some people are more impacted by that. I know someone in my group who's really impacted by the sound of other people, and a lot of other people in the group can, they can deal with all the sounds. Some people do have a harder time dealing with the sounds in my group, but a lot of people manage and they can deal with it. So anyway, now I'm going to open it up to questions. So I'm going to answer any questions that you have, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. It could be anything at all, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. Wang, all right. Do you think the rate of autism is really growing or just people being overdiagnosed? Okay, so I think that the rate is growing. So a big thing is that the way autism is diagnosed has changed, especially the DSM-5, but it's changed over the years. So with the DSM-5, Asperger Syndrome and autism, they got grouped into one, and so did PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. A lot of that is also now under the umbrella of autism. So also, autism wasn't commonly used as a diagnostic to diagnose people until around the 90s. So it used to be like 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 1,000 that were getting diagnosed, but a lot of times weren't getting diagnosed because no one was diagnosing anyone, if that makes any sense. Nowadays too, autism has become a very common thing, like a very common diagnosis. So I think it is overdiagnosed. I think there are times where you can say, okay, is this person really on the autism spectrum? And I think that a lot of times people are just getting the diagnosis just because. Is it growing? Is it increasing? I think maybe to an extent it's increasing, but I think that these numbers might not be 100% accurate. Now, obviously, I cannot prove that, but I do think that nowadays, because everyone is diagnosing, giving an autism diagnosis, that's becoming the diagnosis these days. And a lot of times too, kids, assistance for a kid, like at school, they need, if they have a diagnosis, that will give them, that'll get them an IEP opened up and, get that started and getting services at the school. So I think a lot of times too that, they push for a diagnosis to help the kid get help. I actually know this happens for a fact. It doesn't happen a lot, but I do know that parents or the school push for that at times to help the kid get help. So I know that's something that also happens as well. Well, what did you think? Did you agree or disagree, or anyone else agree or disagree what I said about the rise in autism diagnosis? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? I think there's more to this than we realize. All right, so I think that concludes that. So thank you very much, and have an awesome day of awesomeness.